Today we'll examine 6 times entitled Karens Were Eaten Alive by Deadly Animals, from a tourist who rolled down her window inside a lion park to an influencer who laughed off a shark advisory in Hawaii. But first, we begin in Rajasthan, India, where one woman's refusal to stay inside the Jeep puts her face to face with a mother tigress. It was March 23, 2016, when a private safari Jeep wound along the fixed trail system of a tiger reserve in Rajasthan's Ranthambore region. The dry season had stripped the forest to brittle scrub and exposed sandstone, visibility broken by shallow ravines and thorn bush. The reserve operated under strict regulations. All vehicles followed designated routes. Off-road driving was prohibited by law, and each Jeep was assigned a park-certified naturalist. Venetia Calcroft was a 54-year-old British property consultant who had lived in Dubai for the previous 8 years. Her considerable income had funded wildlife photography trips across East Africa and Southeast Asia, and she maintained a growing portfolio she hoped to exhibit commercially. Calcroft had booked a private safari vehicle at a premium rate, paying roughly 4 times the standard group fare. Her assigned naturalist, Devrath Kulhari, 33, had guided in the reserve for over 7 years and held one of the park's most experienced ratings. Kulhari had positioned the Jeep along a ridgeline trail overlooking a dry riverbed where a resident tigress and her 2 cubs had been sighted intermittently over the previous week. Calcroft had grown increasingly frustrated over the first 2 days of the safari, having managed only distant sightings. She had complained to the lodge manager on the first evening, demanding a different naturalist who would be more accommodating. When Kulhari stopped the Jeep at the ridgeline overlook and pointed out fresh pug marks along the ravine below, Calcroft demanded he drive off trail and descend toward the riverbed. Kulhari explained that off-road driving was a criminal offense within the reserve and that his license would be revoked. Calcroft dismissed this, telling him she would report him to park authorities and file a formal complaint that could cost him future bookings. Kulhari maintained his refusal. Calcroft retrieved her camera bag and stepped out of the Jeep. Kulhari immediately told her to get back inside, warning that a tigress with cubs had been using the ravine and that leaving the vehicle on foot was both illegal and potentially fatal. Calcroft waved him off. She paused briefly at the edge of the slope, glancing back toward the Jeep, then began descending the rocky slope toward the scrub-choked riverbed, roughly 80 yards below the trail. Bengal tigers are among the most powerful predators on the Indian subcontinent, with adult females weighing between 220 and 350 pounds. Despite their size, tigresses move through dense cover with near-complete silence, capable of closing short distances almost instantly. A mother tiger's defensive aggression toward perceived threats to her cubs is among the most dangerous scenarios in wildlife encounters. Their attack relies on explosive ambush from concealment, typically targeting the throat with powerful jaws designed to clamp down and suffocate prey. According to investigators who reconstructed the scene, Calcroft had descended approximately 50 yards from the Jeep when the attack occurred. The tigress had been concealed in a patch of dry scrub less than 20 feet from the path Calcroft was following. Evidence at the scene indicated the animal struck from the side, targeting the throat and neck. The initial bite likely caused severe trauma and rapid loss of mobility. The force of the impact carried Calcroft to the ground. Kulhari reported hearing a brief, cut-off cry followed by silence. He radioed park control immediately. By the time a ranger patrol reached the riverbed approximately 20 to 30 minutes later, the tigress had dragged Calcroft's body into dense cover near the ravine floor. There was no clear evidence of feeding. The tigress remained in defensive control of the area until disturbed. Rangers recovered the body after the tigress was driven off with vehicle noise and firecrackers. The park investigation confirmed that Calcroft had exited the vehicle and entered a restricted area on foot in direct violation of reserve regulations. Kulhari was cleared of any liability. The tigress and her cubs were monitored but not harmed, as the attack was classified as a natural defensive response. While the ravines of Rajasthan had delivered a fatal lesson in territorial defense, the shores of East Africa's largest lake would soon prove equally unforgiving for a woman who believed her past experience made her immune to local dangers. It was June 9th, 2014, when a pale mist hung low over the shoreline of Lake Victoria in Uganda's Jinja district. The wet season had raised the lake's level, pushing murky water into the reed-choked shallows that lined the shore near a small eco-lodge catering to international development workers and consultants. Lauriane Ducharme was a 44-year-old Canadian resort development consultant based in Kampala, contracted by an international hospitality group to assess lakeside properties for potential tourism investment. She had spent 3 weeks traveling Uganda's lake region and had stayed at the Eco Lodge twice before. more. The lodge's staff had posted permanent signage at the waterfront prohibiting swimming due to crocodile activity. The lodge manager reinforced this rule verbally at check-in. Ducharme had dismissed the warnings on her previous visits, telling staff she had swum in Lake Malawi and along the Tanzanian coast without incident, and that the danger was exaggerated to manage liability. On this particular morning, she rose before dawn and walked to a small wooden dock that extended roughly 15 feet into shallow but crocodile-active water. The water along the shoreline was murky and still, visibility reduced to less than a foot beneath the surface. Nile crocodiles are Africa's largest freshwater predator, with mature males exceeding 16 feet and weighing over 1,600 pounds. They are responsible for more human fatalities than any other large African predator, though exact numbers remain uncertain due to underreporting in rural areas. Crocodiles are ambush predators that rely on concealment in murky shallows, capable of remaining motionless and nearly invisible for extended periods before striking with explosive acceleration. Their jaws produce one of the strongest bite forces in the animal kingdom, and the death roll, a violent spinning maneuver, is designed to disorient prey and tear away tissue. Dawn and dusk represent peak hunting periods. According to lodge staff who were first to respond, Ducharme had stood at the end of the dock for several minutes before entering the water, looking out across the still surface. Investigators later noted that the crocodile may have already been positioned in the shallows near the dock before she arrived. A groundskeeper crossing the property heard a brief disturbance from the waterfront, a splash and a cut-off cry, and ran toward the dock. By the time he reached the shoreline, the water had gone still. The victim had been dragged underwater almost immediately. Investigators believe the crocodile then initiated a death roll to subdue her before moving to deeper water. A disturbed patch of mud and flattened reeds at the water's edge was the only indication of what had occurred. Uganda Wildlife Authority officers arrived later that morning. Partial remains were recovered downstream over the following 2 days, consistent with crocodile feeding behavior. Investigators confirmed that Ducharme had entered the water voluntarily, in violation of posted warnings and repeated verbal instructions from lodge staff. The lodge was cleared of liability. The crocodile was never identified or captured. While Lake Victoria's murky shallows had claimed another life, the lion parks of South Africa would soon demonstrate what happens when a tourist treats the world's most efficient predators as a photo opportunity. It was July 18th, 2015, when the midwinter sun cast long shadows across the open grassland of a drive-through lion reserve in South Africa's Gauteng province. The facility housed several prides across a fenced enclosure system that visitors navigated in their personal vehicles. The rules were absolute and displayed at every entry point. Windows must remain closed at all times. Doors must remain locked. Under no circumstances should any part of the body extend beyond the vehicle. Charlinda Welts was a 47-year-old dental office administrator from Fort Worth, Texas, visiting South Africa with her 24-year-old son, Darren. The trip was a graduation gift for Darren, who had recently completed a business degree. The pair had rented a sedan in Johannesburg and driven to the reserve as a day excursion. Charlinda had been photographing through the closed window for the first portion of the drive, growing increasingly frustrated with reflections and distortion in her images. She had already attempted to open the door at an earlier stop, prompting Darren to lock it from the driver's controls. When the vehicle approached a section where a pride of 7 lions rested in dry grass approximately 30 yards from the road, she lowered her window fully. Darren, who was driving, told her to raise it immediately. She dismissed him, insisting the lions were resting and that she would only need a moment. She told him he was being ridiculous and that the animals were clearly not interested in their vehicle. A ranger patrol vehicle approached from behind and issued instructions over the loudspeaker for the occupant to raise the window immediately. Charlinda waved toward the ranger vehicle without looking back and continued adjusting her camera angle, her left arm resting on the doorframe. African lions are the continent's apex social predator, with adult females weighing between 265 and 395 pounds. Lionesses are the primary hunters within a pride, employing coordinated ambush tactics that exploit blind spots and terrain. Their approach is often undetectable until the final explosive charge, covering short distances in seconds. A lion's bite force is estimated to exceed 650 pounds per square inch, concentrated through canines designed to clamp onto the throat and suffocate prey. Even resting prides maintain peripheral awareness, with individual members monitoring different angles simultaneously. A lioness had separated from the resting group and moved along a shallow drainage ditch that ran parallel to the road, placing her on the vehicle's blind side. Neither Charlinda nor Darren detected her approach. According to the ranger's subsequent report, the lioness reached through the open window and clamped onto Charlinda's head and neck. The contact lasted no more than 2 to 3 seconds, a single bite, a pull, and release. Darren grabbed his mother and attempted to pull her back, but the injuries had already been dealt. The Ranger vehicle accelerated toward the scene, the crew deploying air horns, revving engines, and making an aggressive vehicle approach to drive the animal off. The lioness released her grip and retreated as the Ranger vehicle closed the distance, but the damage was catastrophic. Charlinda had sustained deep lacerations across her neck, shoulder, and upper chest. Severed blood vessels produced massive hemorrhaging that Darren could not control with pressure. Emergency medical personnel arrived within 15 minutes and transported her by helicopter. Despite rapid medical intervention, the extent of vascular damage proved fatal. Charlinda Welts was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. The investigation confirmed that the window had been lowered in violation of the reserve's clearly posted rules. The Ranger's loudspeaker instruction had been issued and visibly acknowledged but not followed. Darren Welts was treated for lacerations to his hands and arms sustained while attempting to pull his mother free. The reserve was cleared of negligence. While South Africa's lion country had punished one tourist's impatience, the salmon streams of Alaska would soon demonstrate what happens when a woman's entitlement collides with a grizzly bear defending her cubs. It was September 4th, 2017, when the first frost of autumn dusted the gravel bars along a remote salmon stream deep in Alaska's Katmai region. The Sockeye Run was tapering off, but enough fish remained to draw grizzly bears from across the drainage. A fly-in bear viewing operation ran day trips to the stream, ferrying small groups of visitors by float plane from a lakeside lodge roughly 40 miles to the east. Meredith Langard was a 61-year-old retired corporate attorney from Portland, Oregon, who had built a second career around adventure travel after leaving her firm. Her personality, described by acquaintances as forceful and unyielding, had served her well in courtrooms, but translated poorly to wilderness settings where compliance with guide instructions was a matter of survival. The morning group consisted of Langard and 2 other guests, accompanied by a bush pilot who doubled as the viewing guide. The guide, a 38-year-old Alaska native with 12 years of experience in the Katmai drainage, conducted a thorough briefing at the landing site. National Park Service regulations required a minimum distance of at least 50 yards from bears, with greater distances enforced at the guide's discretion depending on conditions. The guide emphasized that female bears with cubs represented the highest danger and that any approach would be dictated entirely by bear behavior. Langard challenged the buffer distances immediately, calling them excessive and accusing the guide of artificially limiting the experience. She pointed out that she had paid a significant sum for the trip and expected close-range photography opportunities. She told the other guests in the group that she had hiked in grizzly country before and that the distances being enforced were far beyond what was necessary. The guide explained that distance decisions were non-negotiable and based on real-time animal behavior. Langard told him she would be requesting a partial refund and speaking with the lodge owner about the quality of the guiding. The group observed several bears fishing along a shallow riffle for approximately 90 minutes. During a brief rest break, while the guide was attending to another guest's equipment near the riverbank, Langard walked upstream alone along a gravel bar. She rounded a bend and stopped. A female grizzly was fishing with 2 spring cubs at the river's edge, roughly 25 feet away. Langard raised her phone's camera rather than retreating. The wind was blowing downstream, carrying her scent directly toward the bear. The sow detected the scent and visually confirmed the threat almost simultaneously. Grizzly bears are North America's most powerful terrestrial predator, with adult females weighing between 300 and 450 pounds and males exceeding 800 pounds. Despite their bulk, grizzlies can sprint at speeds approaching 35 miles per hour over short distances. A female with cubs will charge with minimal warning when surprised at close range, relying on overwhelming force to neutralize perceived threats. Their claws, measuring up to 4 inches, can open deep lacerations with a single swipe, while their bite force is estimated to exceed 1,200 pounds per square inch. Most defensive attacks are brief but devastating, with the bear disengaging once the threat is neutralized. The sow charged immediately. The distance left virtually no time for an effective reaction. The bear closed the gap in under 2 seconds, striking her with a forepaw that knocked her off her feet and onto the gravel bar. The bear bit down on her shoulder and upper arm, the crushing bite causing severe trauma to the shoulder and upper torso. The bear delivered several mauling bites and swipes in rapid succession before releasing, stepping back to assess whether the threat had ended. Langard lay motionless on the gravel. The bear circled once, snorting, then gathered her cubs and moved upstream at a fast walk. The bear had disengaged quickly, consistent with a defensive response rather than predation. The guide, alerted by the commotion, reached the bend within minutes. Langard was unconscious and bleeding severely from multiple bite and claw injuries concentrated across her face, scalp, arms, and upper body. The guide applied of pressure and radioed for an emergency float plane extraction. The nearest trauma center was over an hour away by air. Langard never regained consciousness. She succumbed to her injuries shortly after arrival at the trauma center. While many defensive bear attacks are survivable, the extent of trauma and delayed evacuation contributed to a fatal outcome. The investigation determined that Langard had left the group without authorization and approached a female grizzly with cubs at a distance well inside the minimum safety requirement. The guide and operation were cleared of liability, while Alaska's bear country had claimed a life through one woman's refusal to respect distance. The forested highlands of Sri Lanka would soon reveal what happens when a tourist wanders into a leopard's territory after dark. It was November 8, 2013, when the late monsoon rains had left the hill country of central Sri Lanka lush and dripping. The cloud forests that clung to the ridgelines above a small boutique nature lodge were home to one of the densest populations of Sri Lankan leopards on the island. The lodge, located on the edge of a national park buffer zone, attracted international visitors seeking wildlife photography opportunities. Frauke Kettmann was a 45-year-old German travel blogger based in Berlin, whose online presence centered on curated images from remote natural destinations. Her content strategy prioritized dramatic, close-range wildlife photography, and she had built a modest following through striking images captured on previous trips to Borneo, Madagascar, and Patagonia. She viewed safety briefings as generic legal formalities rather than genuine survival guidance. The lodge manager conducted an in-person safety briefing upon arrival, emphasizing that guests must not walk the grounds alone after dark. Sri Lankan leopards were active nocturnally, and the surrounding forest provided ideal cover for ambush. A large male leopard had been observed regularly on camera traps along the trail system bordering the lodge property, and had become partially habituated to human activity in the area, making him less likely to retreat and more likely to hold his ground when disturbed. Kettmann dismissed the briefing at dinner that evening, telling the manager his warnings were overly dramatic and designed to frighten guests into staying at the lodge bar rather than exploring. The following evening, Kettmann told her companion she intended to walk the forest trail adjacent to the property to photograph the sunset. Her companion, another German tourist, declined to join her and urged her to stay within the lodge grounds. Kettmann departed alone at approximately 5:40 p.m., carrying her camera and a small flashlight. Sri Lankan leopards are a subspecies unique to the island, where they function as the apex predator in the absence of tigers or lions. Adult males weigh between 120 and 170 pounds and are almost exclusively nocturnal hunters. Leopards rely on stealth and concealment, approaching prey from ground cover before launching explosive short-range attacks targeting the throat and neck. Leopards are fiercely territorial and will aggressively defend fresh kills cached in dense vegetation. While unprovoked predatory attacks on adult humans are rare, defensive attacks triggered by sudden close-range intrusion near a food cache can be violent and swift. Such attacks are extremely rare and typically occur only when a human unknowingly approaches within a few meters of a guarded kill. According to the investigation, Kettmann had followed the trail approximately half a mile into the forest before leaving the path. Her camera was recovered near a dense thicket of undergrowth, where wildlife officers later confirmed a fresh kill had been cached, the partially consumed remains of a small sambar deer concealed in ground cover. Evidence at the scene indicated that Kettmann had come within a few meters of the cache in near total darkness. Based on her camera's position on the ground, investigators believe she may have been crouching to examine something in the undergrowth when the encounter occurred, a posture that, combined with the darkness, could have reduced her profile to something the leopard perceived as a more immediate threat to its kill. Track evidence and the pattern of injuries suggested her proximity to the cache likely triggered a rare defensive attack launched from ground level. The leopard struck at her head and neck, delivering a bite and brief clawing attack before disengaging quickly. The injuries, though inflicted in seconds, caused severe neck trauma and blood loss, which, combined with delayed medical access, proved fatal. The attack was consistent with a brief, explosive defensive response rather than sustained predation. Such fatal outcomes are exceptionally rare and typically require extremely close-range surprise encounters near a guarded kill. The leopard had already withdrawn into cover by the time search teams arrived. Lodge staff organized a search when Kettmann failed to return by 7:30 p.m. Her body was discovered along the forest trail at approximately 9:15 p.m. Wildlife officers arrived the following morning, confirming the presence of the cached kill and leopard tracks consistent with a large male. The animal was never captured. The investigation concluded that Kettmann had entered a restricted area after dark in violation of lodge safety instructions and had unknowingly approached a leopard's food cache at extremely close range, triggering what wildlife officers described as a rare but documented type of defensive encounter. The lodge was cleared of liability, While Sri Lanka's cloud forests had punished one blogger's disregard for the night, the warm waters off Hawaii's North Shore would soon deliver the final chapter, a confrontation between an influencer's ego and one of the ocean's most dangerous predators. It was October 14, 2018, when heavy autumn swells pushed turbid water along the north shore of Oahu, Hawaii. Recent storms had stirred sediment from the ocean floor, reducing underwater visibility to less than 10 feet along the outer reef. A confirmed tiger shark sighting earlier that morning had prompted lifeguards to post red warning flags and issue verbal advisories for all swimmers and surfers to exit the water. By mid-morning, most of the regular surf crowd had complied. Tamsin Calloway was a 31-year-old Australian fitness influencer from Sydney's northern beaches, visiting Hawaii on a 3-week content creation trip funded by a sportswear brand. Calloway had built a following of over 200,000 across her platforms through a mix of surf photography, ocean swimming footage, and fitness content filmed in exotic coastal locations. Her brand depended on dramatic ocean imagery, and the North Shore's famous winter swells represented a critical content opportunity. Calloway had arrived at the beach shortly after the advisory was posted. A lifeguard approached her in the parking area and informed her that the water was closed due to a shark sighting and that conditions were dangerous. Calloway told the lifeguard she was from Australia, had grown up surfing around sharks, and that the advisory was an overreaction. She pointed out that several surfers were still visible beyond the break and suggested the closure was not being enforced seriously. The lifeguard repeated the advisory firmly and explained that the remaining surfers had been in the water before the sighting and were being directed to shore. Calloway laughed and told him that Australian beaches stayed open in worse conditions than this. She dismissed him and walked toward the waterline with a borrowed surfboard. A second lifeguard on the tower used a megaphone to direct Calloway not to enter the water. She hesitated briefly at the waterline, scanning the murky surface, then paddled out regardless, moving past the shore break and toward the outer reef approximately 200 yards offshore. Tiger sharks are one of the species most frequently involved in serious shark incidents worldwide, and among the most common culprits in fatal encounters in Hawaiian waters. Adults commonly exceed 12 feet in length and can weigh over 1,400 pounds. Tiger sharks are opportunistic predators that patrol turbid nearshore waters, relying on reduced visibility to approach prey undetected. Their broad, serrated teeth are designed to shear through flesh, bone, and even sea turtle shell. Most attacks involve a single powerful strike from below or behind, though secondary bites have been documented when continued movement in the water draws the shark back. The shark was believed to have been in the area throughout the morning based on multiple sightings. Lifeguards had spotted what they believed to be the same animal twice in the previous 2 hours, estimating its length at over 12 feet. According to witness accounts from surfers who had remained in the water, Calloway had been paddling along the outer reef for approximately 15 minutes when the strike occurred. The shark struck from below, the impact severely, damaging the board and pulling Calloway into the water. Witnesses described a powerful initial strike, followed by a brief secondary bite before the water settled. The injuries were catastrophic. No prolonged feeding behavior was observed, consistent with an investigatory or predatory strike pattern. Lifeguards on jet skis reached the area within 4 minutes. They recovered Calloway floating face down approximately 30 yards from the point of attack. Her left leg had been severed below the knee, and catastrophic bite wounds extended across her hip and lower torso. Massive blood loss had rendered her unresponsive. Emergency medical personnel met the jet ski at the shoreline, but Tamsin Calloway was pronounced dead before reaching the hospital. The investigation confirmed that Calloway had entered the water in direct violation of a posted shark advisory and multiple verbal warnings from lifeguard staff. The shark was never identified or captured. Lifeguards and beach management were cleared of all liability, with investigators noting that every reasonable warning had been issued and deliberately ignored.